Close your eyes for a moment. Now imagine stepping backward through time. Not years, not centuries, not even millennia. We're going back 4,100,000 years. A number so vast it breaks the human mind. A distance in time so profound that if you tried to count every single day between now and then, one number per second, it would take you over a century to finish. This is the Pliocene epoch. An Earth. Earth is unrecognizable. Open your eyes now. You're standing in what will one day be called the Great Rift Valley of East Africa. But there are no countries here. No borders. No names. Just raw, primordial existence. The air itself feels different against your skin, thick and humid, carrying scents you've never encountered. Volcanic soil. Wet vegetation. Something musky and alive. The temperature hovers warmer than the Africa you might know today. The climate generous with rain, the sky often heavy with clouds that bruise purple before unleashing torrents. Look around you. This isn't the endless savanna of nature documentaries. That world doesn't exist yet. Instead, you're surrounded by a patchwork, what scientists call a mosaic environment. Dense forests cluster near waterways, their canopies thick enough to block out the sun. But between these green fortresses, the trees thin out into woodlands. Open spaces are beginning to emerge, grasslands slowly claiming territory from the retreating forests. Climate change is happening here too, but on a scale that makes our modern concerns seem like a heartbeat. Over millions of years, Africa is gradually drying, cooling, transforming. The ground beneath your feet trembles slightly. Not enough to alarm you, but enough to remind you that this land is alive, restless. The Rift Valley is tearing Africa apart, millimeter by millimeter, year by year. Volcanoes punctuate the horizon, some sleeping, others sending lazy columns of smoke into the atmosphere. This is a violent cradle, forged by tectonic forces that will, over incomprehensible spans of time, shape the evolution of our entire species. But here's what strikes you most: the sounds. There are no cars, no planes, no human voices chattering about bills or weather or weekend plans. Instead, the air vibrates with calls you've never heard. Something that sounds almost like laughter but isn't. Deep guttural barks. High-pitched alarm screams. The rustle of something large moving through underbrush. The distant roar of a predator that sends birds exploding from the treetops. This is Earth's symphony before humanity learned to play its instrument. And somewhere in this alien world, hidden among the trees and venturing cautiously into the open spaces, they exist. Australopithecus animensis. The name means nothing to them, of course. They have no language for themselves, no concept that they're a species among species. But to us, looking back across that impossible gulf of time, they are monumentally important. Because somewhere in their biology, somewhere in their daily struggle to simply see another sunrise, they carry the future. They carry us. Picture them now because they deserve to be seen. They're small. Shockingly small by our standards. An adult male might reach barely 4 feet tall. Females are smaller still, perhaps 3.5 feet, weighing no more than a large dog. Their bodies are a contradiction, a blueprint still being revised by evolution. Their faces would look ape-like to you, with prominent jaws and flat noses, brow ridges casting shadows over dark eyes that hold an intelligence we're only beginning to understand. Long arms, fingers curved for gripping branches. But here's what changes everything. Look down at their feet. Look at how they stand. They walk upright. Not occasionally. Not awkwardly. They are bipedal. Their ankles show adaptations that are unmistakably human-like. Their knee joints angle inward just like yours. The shape of their pelvis, though still different from ours, has begun the fundamental shift that allows for walking on 2 legs as a primary mode of movement. This is revolutionary. This is everything. Because most of the world's creatures are walking on 4 legs. It's efficient. It's fast. It's what works. But these beings, these small, vulnerable creatures in a landscape filled with things that want to eat them, have committed to something different. Something that seems, on the surface, like a terrible idea. Walking upright makes you slower than running on all fours. It makes you taller, more visible to predators scanning the landscape. It makes you less stable, more prone to injury from falls. Evolution doesn't do things without reason, but the reason for bipedalism at this exact moment in history is still one of the great mysteries we're trying to solve. They live in small groups, perhaps 15 to 30 individuals, mostly family units bound by relationships we can only glimpse through the fossil record. Mothers and infants. Siblings. A dominant male, perhaps several. They communicate but not with words. Gestures. Facial expressions. Vocalizations that carry meaning, warnings, emotions. They're more than apes, but not yet human. They exist in that profound in-between space that defines this entire era. Their days begin before dawn, when the world is painted in shades of blue and the forest sounds shift from nocturnal hunters to morning foragers. They sleep in the trees, high enough to avoid most predators, clustered together for warmth and security. As light filters through the canopy, they begin to stir. Grooming rituals. Quiet vocalizations. The preparation for another day of survival. Because that's what every single day is, survival. They'll descend from their sleeping trees and begin the search for food. Fruits when they can find them, the sugar precious and rare. Seeds. Tubers dug from the ground with their bare hands. Insects plucked from bark and leaf. Occasionally, if they're lucky and brave, they might scavenge from a predator's kill, though this is dangerous work that can turn deadly in seconds. They need to eat constantly, their bodies small furnaces requiring fuel, and the landscape doesn't always cooperate. Water is both salvation and threat. They need it desperately, but so does everything else. The waterholes and riverbanks are gathering places for the entire ecosystem. Elephants, early species you wouldn't quite recognize. Giraffes, but different from today's elegant creatures. Antelope, primates like themselves. And waiting, always waiting, the predators. Saber-toothed cats with canines designed to deliver killing bites. Leopards that hunt from ambush, powerful enough to drag prey twice their size into trees. Hyenas, already laughing their bone-crushing laughs. Crocodiles lurking in the shallows. And perhaps most terrifying of all, massive eagles with wingspans broad enough to cast shadows and talons strong enough to carry off a child. Fossil evidence doesn't lie. We've found their bones with tooth marks. We've seen the puncture wounds from predators' canines. We know with grim certainty that Australopithecus anamensis wasn't the hunter. They were the hunted. So why did bipedalism persist? Why did evolution favor this seemingly vulnerable adaptation? The theories multiply. Maybe walking upright was more energy efficient for covering long distances between scattered food sources. Maybe it helped with thermoregulation, reducing the body surface exposed to the brutal African sun. Maybe it freed their hands to carry food back to others, fostering social bonds and cooperation. Maybe, some researchers suggest, early hominins waded through shallow water frequently, and bipedalism emerged from that behavior. We don't know. Not for certain. And that uncertainty, that mystery, makes them all the more fascinating. What we do know is this: they survived. Against odds that seem impossible, in a world that offered them no advantages and countless threats, they persisted. Day after day. Generation after generation. For hundreds of thousands of years. And somewhere in that persistence, somewhere in the way they moved and ate and protected their young and faced down predators and adapted to changing environments, the future was being written. The sun is setting now over the Rift Valley. The group we've been watching climbs back into the trees, settling into positions refined by instinct and experience. An infant clings to its mother's chest. Two juveniles wrestle briefly before settling down. The adults scan the darkening landscape one final time, alert for danger even as exhaustion pulls at them. Tomorrow, they'll do it all again. The search for food. The evasion of death. The small, uncelebrated acts of survival that accumulate across time into something far larger than any individual life. They don't know they're part of a story. They don't know that millions of years from now, creatures who walk upright just like them, but with larger brains and complex languages and technology that would seem like magic, will dig up their bones and try desperately to understand who they were. But we know. And in knowing, we begin to understand something profound about ourselves. We are not separate from this world. We are not above the brutal mathematics of survival. We are the inheritors of 4 million years of struggle, adaptation, and sheer, stubborn persistence. And it all begins here, in this violent, beautiful, impossible world, where something almost human learned to stand upright and face the future. The story is just beginning. Dawn breaks over the Rift Valley, and with it comes a simple, terrible truth. Today, someone might die. Not might in the abstract sense we use in our comfortable modern lives. Might as in real, immediate, statistical probability. In a group of 20 individuals, the odds are calculated by evolution itself. Infants don't make it past their first year. Juveniles fall from trees or wander too far from the group. Adults suffer injuries that never heal, infections that spread like wildfire through vulnerable bodies. And then there are the predators. Always the predators. Our group of Australopithecus animensis has already descended from their sleeping trees. The morning ritual of grooming and soft vocalizations has finished. Now comes the work that defines existence, finding enough food to see another sunset. They move through the woodland as a unit, never truly alone, because isolation means death. The females cluster together, infants clinging to their bodies. Several juveniles play fight near the center of the group, their mock battles teaching skills they'll desperately need later. The males range slightly farther out, their bodies tense, eyes constantly scanning. They're not looking for food. They're looking for what might be looking at them. The landscape offers no guarantees. Yesterday, there were figs ripening near the river. Today, baboons have claimed that territory, and baboons are not creatures to be trifled with. Larger, more aggressive, with canines designed for fighting, they'll defend their food sources with violence that can maim or kill. Our group detours, moving deeper into the woodland where they remember finding tubers last season. Memory. That's the invisible advantage they're developing. The ability to recall where food appeared months ago, to recognize seasonal patterns, to build mental maps of a territory spanning several square miles. Their brains aren't large by our standards, roughly 370 cubic centimeters, about the size of a chimpanzee's. But something is happening inside that bone vault. Neural pathways are being refined. Connections are forming that will, over millions of years, explode into the consciousness we now carry. They reach a clearing where the grass grows shorter, and this is where the fear intensifies. Open spaces are necessary. This is where certain plants grow, where you can see opportunities. But openness is also exposure. Every member of the group feels it, an ancestral anxiety that you still carry in your DNA. That feeling when you're walking alone at night and hear footsteps behind you? That's them. That's 4 million years of knowing that open ground is where death comes from. A female begins digging, her fingers surprisingly dexterous, pulling at the soil to expose tubers beneath. Others join her. They work quickly, efficiently, always aware. The juveniles have stopped playing. Even they understand the vulnerability of this moment. Then, the alarm call. It's a vocalization that spikes your blood pressure even across the millennia. Sharp, urgent, unmistakable. Everyone freezes. Heads turn in unison toward the tree line, perhaps 60 yards away. In the shadows, movement. A leopard. Not the sleek, almost beautiful creature you've seen in documentaries. This is a killing machine that has refined its craft over millions of years before our ancestors even learned to stand upright. Perhaps 150 pounds of pure muscle, camouflaged perfectly in the dappled light, with night vision eyes and retractable claws and a bite force strong enough to crush a skull. And it's watching them. The group doesn't run. Not yet. Running triggers chase instinct. Instead, they cluster together, making themselves larger. The males move to the perimeter, their bodies positioned between the predator and the vulnerable members. They vocalize loud, aggressive sounds meant to convey a message: we're not easy prey. We'll fight. The cost will be high. This is game theory playing out in real time. The leopard is calculating energy expenditure versus potential gain. These creatures are small, yes, but there are many of them. They're grouped together. Some of the males are displaying behaviors that suggest they'll defend the group. Is the hunt worth the risk of injury? An injured predator is a dead predator. The standoff lasts perhaps 2 minutes. To our group, it feels like hours. Then, with movements so fluid they seem supernatural, the leopard turns and melts back into the forest. Not gone. Never truly gone. Just postponing the interaction. The group waits another full minute before movement resumes. The tension drains slowly, replaced by something else: the need to eat. Because fear doesn't eliminate hunger. Terror doesn't make survival any less demanding. They gather what they can and move on, heading toward a water source they visited 3 days ago. The journey takes an hour, every moment a calculation of risk and reward. They pass through territories that overlap with other groups, other species. Sometimes they encounter another band of Australopithecus anamensis, and what happens next depends on resources and relationships we can only guess at. Sometimes there's aggressive posturing. Sometimes there's avoidance. Occasionally, perhaps, there's cooperation or even exchange between groups. We don't know. The fossil record doesn't preserve social dynamics. When they reach the water, the problem multiplies exponentially. Everything needs water, and everything knows where to find it. The riverbank is crowded with life. Ancient elephants, their tusks different from modern species, drink deeply from the shallows. Antelope approach nervously, eyes rolling, ready to bolt. Birds cluster in the branches overhead. And in the water itself, partially submerged, crocodiles wait with the patience that only ambush predators possess. Our group approaches cautiously. The adults drink first, quickly, never letting their attention waver from their surroundings. Then the juveniles, supervised closely. The infants nurse from their mothers, too young yet to drink independently. The entire operation takes perhaps 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes contain a lifetime's worth of vigilance. As they prepare to leave, one of the juveniles spots something: the partially eaten carcass of an antelope, perhaps 20 yards from the water's edge. The kill is recent, the predator likely still close. But meat, protein, the dense calories their bodies crave. 2 of the adult males approach carefully, scanning constantly for the kill's owner. The rest of the group watches, ready to flee. The males reach the carcass and work quickly, tearing at the remains with their hands and teeth. They're not equipped for this, not really. Their teeth are designed for plants, not meat. But they're opportunists, and evolution favors those who can adapt their diet to available resources. They manage to pull away several chunks before the owner returns. A hyena, its laugh echoing across the clearing. The males retreat immediately, clutching their prizes. The group vanishes into the woodland, moving fast now, putting distance between themselves and the confrontation. Later, in a safer location, they'll share the meat. Not equally, hierarchy matters here, but share nonetheless. And in that sharing, in that cooperation that overrides pure self-interest, we see something recognizable. Something that looks, if you squint across the ages, like humanity. The sun climbs higher. The day continues. The brutal calculus of survival never stops. Because this is what life was. Not adventure. Not noble struggle. Just the relentless, grinding work of staying alive one more day. Of finding food. Of avoiding death. Of protecting the young. Of remembering where resources hide and when seasons change. And somehow, impossibly, they're getting better at it. Their bodies are adapting. Their behaviors are refining. Their brains are growing, synapse by synapse, generation by generation, building toward something neither they nor we can fully comprehend from this moment. Tomorrow will bring new dangers, new challenges, new opportunities for extinction. But tonight, they'll climb back into the trees, bellies not quite full but not quite empty either, and they'll sleep. And that, in this brutal world, is victory enough. Fast forward now. Not gradually, but in a violent lurch through time that collapses 4 million years into seconds. It's August 1994. The Pliocene epoch is gone, buried under layers of sediment and volcanic ash and the accumulated dust of incomprehensible time. The Great Rift Valley still exists, but it's different now. Kenya is a nation. There are roads, research stations, teams of scientists working under the African sun, brushing away dirt with tools more delicate than surgery. And in a place called Kanapoi in the Turkana Basin, they find something. The bone. Then another. And another. Fragments of a tibia, the lower leg bone. Pieces of jaw with teeth still attached. The upper arm bone of an individual who lived and died when the world was young. Each discovery sends ripples through the scientific community because these aren't just fossils. They're messages from the deep past, written in calcium and phosphate, waiting 4 million years to be read. The researchers named them Australopithecus anamensis. The species we've been watching. The creatures who walked upright through that dangerous, beautiful world. And now, held carefully in human hands, their bones finally speak. Look at what they tell us. The tibia, that leg bone, shows clear adaptations for bipedalism. The way it angles, the structure of the knee joint, the evidence of weight-bearing in an upright position, this isn't speculation. This is proof as solid as the bone itself. They walked like us. Not exactly like us, but close enough that if you saw their footprints in the mud, you'd recognize something profoundly familiar. The teeth reveal their diet. Microscopic analysis of wear patterns, isotope studies of the enamel. Science has become so sophisticated that we can actually determine what they ate millions of years ago. Plants, mostly. The C3 photosynthesis pathway dominant in trees and shrubs. But also evidence of seasonal dietary shifts, suggesting they adapted their food sources as the environment demanded. Flexibility. Opportunism. Survival. The bones show something else, too. Evidence of injury. Healed fractures. Teeth broken and worn down. The physical cost of living in that world is written directly into their skeletons. But here's what's remarkable. Many of these injuries healed, which means others cared for them. A broken leg in the wild is typically a death sentence. You can't run, can't climb, can't forage effectively. But these individuals survived their injuries long enough for bone to knit back together. That requires help. That requires a group that didn't abandon its wounded. That requires something we might cautiously call compassion, or at least the evolutionary precursor to it. But the bones also reveal the gaps, the vast territories of knowledge we'll never access. They can't tell us what sounds these creatures made when they called to each other at dawn. They can't preserve the moment a mother first realized her infant had died. They can't show us whether they felt wonder when they looked at the stars, or fear when thunder rolled across the valley, or anything resembling what we might call thought. We're looking at our ancestors through a keyhole, glimpsing fragments of lives that deserve to be fully seen but never can be. And yet, what we do know is staggering. These creatures, these small, vulnerable beings who should have been evolutionary dead ends, gave us everything. The bipedalism they developed freed their hands. Not immediately for tools, those won't appear for another million years, but for carrying, for gesturing, for eventually manipulating the world in ways no other species had attempted. Their social structures, the cooperation required to survive, laid the groundwork for increasingly complex group dynamics. Communication, division of labor, all the invisible architecture that would eventually support language and culture and civilization. Their brains, still small, were already beginning the journey. Natural selection was favoring individuals who could remember, who could plan, who could solve problems creatively. Every generation, the threshold shifted slightly. A few more cubic centimeters, a few more neural connections. Compounded across millennia, these tiny changes would explode into consciousness. But here's what we need to understand. They weren't trying to become us. They weren't working towards some predetermined goal. They were simply surviving, day after day, generation after generation, making decisions based on immediate needs, unaware that those decisions were steering the entire trajectory of life on Earth. Evolution doesn't have foresight. It doesn't plan. It only selects for what works right now, in this environment, against these challenges. The fact that Australopithecus anamensis led to us is almost accidental, a contingent outcome dependent on countless variables that could have gone differently. One major volcanic eruption at the wrong time. One disease that spread too fast. One predator species that became too efficient. Any of these could have erased them completely, and we would never have existed to ask questions about our origins. That should terrify and humble us in equal measure. Because when you walk through your day, checking your phone, buying coffee, complaining about traffic, you're doing so because a small group of beings 4 million years ago didn't give up. They faced leopards and saber-toothed cats. They endured droughts and injuries and the death of their children. They walked on legs that were still learning how to walk, through a world that wanted them dead, and they survived. You are the result of an unbroken chain of survival stretching back through 4 million years of struggle. Every single one of your ancestors, from Australopithecus anamensis forward, lived long enough to reproduce. Not one link in that chain failed. The odds of you existing are so infinitesimally small that it borders on impossible. And yet here you are. So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we honor the brutal, beautiful journey that brought us here? We remember. We study. We preserve what fragments remain of these ancient lives and extract every possible lesson from them. We support the paleontologists and archaeologists still working in places like Turkana, still brushing dirt from bones that reshape our understanding of ourselves. We fund the research. We share the stories. Because these aren't just fossils. They're family. Distant, unrecognizable, separated by a gulf of time so vast it defies comprehension, but family nonetheless. Their DNA flows in your veins, modified and refined but fundamentally connected. When you stand upright, you're using the same basic skeletal structure they developed. When you carry your child, you're repeating behaviors they pioneered. The story of Australopithecus anamensis isn't ancient history. It's current events. It's happening right now in your body, in your behaviors, in the way your brain processes the world around you. And the story isn't over. Somewhere in the future, if we survive our own challenges, beings might look back at us the way we look at Australopithecus anamensis. They might marvel at our primitive technology, our small understanding, our struggles with problems that seem insurmountable to us but might appear simple to them. They might wonder what it was like to be almost them, in the same way we wonder what it was like to be almost us. The chain continues. The story evolves. The question is, what role will you play in it? Will you be curious? Will you seek to understand not just where we came from, but where we're going? Will you preserve the knowledge, support the science, share the wonder with the next generation? Or will you let 4 million years of struggle and survival and stubborn persistence end with indifference? The choice is yours. But know this, you're standing on the shoulders of creatures who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. You carry their legacy in every cell of your body. The sun is setting over the Rift Valley once more. The volcanoes are quiet today. The forests have changed, the climate has shifted, but the land remembers. Deep in the soil, bones still wait to be discovered, stories still wait to be told. And somewhere, in the space between what we know and what we've yet to learn, the echo of ancient footsteps still resounds. They walked so you could run. Don't forget them. Subscribe to journey deeper into our origins. Share this story. Support paleontological research. The past is calling. Will you answer?